Hey guys, welcome to Challenges Education. In our current affairs section, we have started daily news analysis of All India Radio from newsonair.com. I hope this will help accelerating your preparation for government exams. Here the show begins.
Weekly program Money Talk. Now we bring you a discussion on Resolution of NPAs. The participants are Maithili Bhusnurmat, Economic Analyst, and Vinay Pandey, Journalist.
The state-run banks have come up with a proposal to resolve the NPA issues. They have put out a five-pronged approach, which basically is based on the level of NPA. So there's something for SMEs, then going up and eventually setting up a asset management company. What is new in this proposal that the banks have put forward? They have taken the lead and the government is just kind of backing it. So what do you feel about these five proposals that have come forward from the state-run banks?
Well, Vinay, you started off by asking me what is new. The answer to that is really nothing. And frankly, the committee is not to be blamed entirely because there was only that much that they could do. Given the circumstances, in fact, under the IBC, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, whatever has been done is being done. And the answer really lies in extensive recapitalization of public sector banks and, more importantly, allowing these public sector banks to function as banks. Today, the problem really is that the public sector banks are not allowed to function as banks. They are cast to achieve various social objectives. The responsibility of achieving various social objectives is thrust upon these public sector banks. And until we recognize that we need to treat not only the symptom but also the cause of the present malaise, I think anything that we come up with will always fall short of what is required. So I frankly am quite disappointed with the proposal, whereas the proposal does not go deep enough. It's basically old wine in new bottles. So I'm not very sure we'll really be able to address the issues that are facing us.
Right, that is very true. I mean, there's nothing in it to say how we will, even if we resolve these issues, what happens going ahead? Will the backlog not again of NPAs not be created? But if I just come to the first two ideas, SMEs, loans up to, let's say, 500 crores. Here what they're saying is banks themselves have to come forward with ideas. They have some suggestions. They've also given flag some good practices. But we find that this kind of thing has not worked because banks could resolve these problems and they would have been resolved by now.
Absolutely.
And also the issue of how do you get rid of these assets, these NPAs, without inviting the vigilance and other issues? So the first two, do they make any progress where banks themselves are required to come forward and resolve these NPAs? Do you think that is just a statement of intent or can it work also?
It was very much there on the cards earlier also. There was nothing preventing banks from coming out and trying to resolve these issues. But the biggest worry really is, as you talked about, in the case of public sector banks, they're always worried about the three C's. You have the CVC, the CVI, you have the ED, you have all kinds of investigating agencies. And even much after the senior officials retire from a bank, there's always this fear because almost any resolution process will entail some kind of a haircut, some kind of a sacrifice. So even if the bank can afford it, the question is, do they have the courage to do it? So I really do not see anything really new in this proposal. As I said, there was nothing preventing the banks in the past also from doing it. So merely to say that you can go ahead and do it, will that suffice? Will that make banks confident and will they take the courage to do this?
There's another category of loans where they say multiple banks are involved and they say everybody will come together, sort of committee of creditors, and try and resolve these assets where one bank takes the lead. Now that is precisely the kind of arrangement that is already available under IBC, where effectively court gets all the banks together and proposals come and you take a call. So is this needed or is just creating one more step in resolution of loan that could have been done away with actually and you can straight away go to IBC?
Well, absolutely. In fact, ironically, this joint lenders forum that was there under the earlier system where the RBI said that, all the lenders can come together, form a joint lenders forum and try and resolve these issues. That was scrapped by the Reserve Bank of India once they said, no, you have to go through the IBC route. So all the other avenues for resolving stressed assets, whether it was the SDR, joint lenders forum, all these other mechanisms the RBI had effectively ended and said you could go down the IBC route alone. So now to again revive it, because frankly, all banks, the problem really is because of the breakdown of what was known as the consortium culture. Years ago, the Reserve Bank of India had very strict guidelines that whenever you lend, wherever you have many banks lending to one particular borrower, it has to be done through a consortium. That is a formal arrangement whereby the banks shared both the risks as well as the responsibilities as also the security. Then, courtesy mainly because of pressure from private sector banks, which did not want to abide by the consortium discipline and were much more nimble-footed than the private sector banks, the RBI relaxed the consortium discipline and allowed what is known as multiple banking, wherein it was each bank looking out for itself. So you had many private sector banks which at the first sight of trouble got out of these multiple banking arrangements, and the public sector banks were left holding the can. So this is what has really happened. So now to say that you can go back and 66%, which is what was being allowed under the IBC amendment also, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to resuscitate companies which are worth resuscitating, or are we trying to push everybody into the liquidation and the insolvency route? Because as it is, you see, the NCLT is really overburdened. There are a number of companies which are now being referred to the NCLT. You have many cases that are again stuck in court. So I think somewhere along the way we have lost the sight of what is the objective. Is the objective to get as much as possible for the banks? Is it the objective to kind of ensure that whatever assets have been created, because things like these power projects, etc., they have been created ultimately with taxpayer money, your money, my money, the depositor's money. So where do we draw the line? Should we leave it to the banks? So now what you're saying is merely stating the obvious.
What is billed as the most significant proposal is the idea of asset management company or alternate investment funds, as they have talked about. Now, this is also not a new idea in the sense that it's kind of a bad bank where you absolutely buy. It's just not being called a bad bank, but basically buy the bad asset, somebody puts in the money, and then you hope to resolve and make more money out of it. Now, banks themselves are capital starved. Where do they find the money to set up these assets? And they have talked about outside investment. Now, are we sure that somebody is going to be finding this kind of AMC arrangement attractive when the issue ultimately this fund has to also resolve these assets for it to make money? So if the resolution process itself has so many issues, why would anybody put money in this asset management company that we are talking about? So is this also something, do you think that it can take off, or is it again an idea that that requires a lot more, and maybe government funding also, which the government does not seem to be willing to provide because it is already providing capital to banks, and then you say that look, you need more funds for something like a bad bank. So does it work?
You hit the nail on the head, Vinay, because when you said then AMC is nothing but a bad bank but in a different name. If I can be very Shakespearean and say a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, whereas over here the AMC by any other name or a bad bank by any other name would smell as rotten, because ultimately what you are going to do is transfer the stressed assets from the bank balance sheet to the balance sheet of either the AMC or the alternate investment fund or the bad bank, call it what you will. So the whole idea is to kind of paper over and make the balance sheet of the bank look very good. It's a transfer on the left hand to the right hand, particularly if these AMCs or alternate investment funds are going to be funded by the bank itself. I find the State Bank of India chairman saying that we will take the lead and we will set up, the AMC. If the State Bank of India has so much money, what is preventing them from doing it so far? We already have a public sector ARC which hasn't really done very much, because the same issues are there. What is the kind of haircut? That means what is the kind of sacrifice that the bank is going to take? If an asset is worth 100 rupees, can I transfer it to an ARC or to a bad bank at 30 rupees? Who will account for the 70 rupees? Do I have sufficient justification? Will the CVC or the CBI ask me, was there an underhand deal? Is that why you did it? So all these issues which are there with a bad bank, which is why the government in fact turned down the idea of a bad bank. You're just resuscitating it in a new way.
Okay, one last idea before we move on to other issues is the idea of asset trading platform. Now, that also again faces same issues, because asset trading, at the end of the day, you need to take a haircut to sell a bad asset. So again, does this solve anything? Is it any new thing that can help you take the process forward? It's again one of those ideas that is there on the paper but not workable.
I would think so. It is a very good idea on paper. We haven't seen much results from whatever little we have tried to sell. The classic example being that of Vijay Mallya's house in Bombay. They were able to sell, the banks were able to sell his house in Goa, but his house in Bombay, which is a really prime estate, and you and I might love to buy it, except that you and I don't have the kind of money to buy it. And the State Bank of India, which has been trying to organize that sale, has successively been lowering the reserve price, but there are no takers. So the fact is that in India, there are very few takers for these stressed assets. Today, steel is a different story altogether, because the entire sector has revived. So there are takers for steel projects which are not doing well, steel assets which are not doing well. So there are huge issues with taking over of stressed assets. For government to step up to the till, and this is the position all over the world, wherever there have been banking crises, invariably, rightly or wrongly, sadly or not so sadly, it has always been taxpayer money. And at the end of the day, let's also accept that in India, the kind of money that we have spent on reviving the banking sector is far less than many countries, including in the West, have spent on resuscitating their banking sector. Whatever capital banks require should be provided for them. At the same time, you must allow these banks to function as banks. Today, public sector banks are asked to open Jan Dhan accounts. Their officials are asked to go on election duty. They are also asked to verify Aadhaar accounts. Aadhaar verification is supposed to be done by them. So you impose so many responsibilities on public sector banks. So you wonder, are they fish or fowl? You have to be very clear what they are. If they are fish, allow them to swim. If they are fowl, let them fly. but don't expect them to be a bit of both and then judge them by the same yardstick that we judge private sector banks.
So you have raised lots of issues. But we've seen these issues cannot be, or we've not been able to address the issues in the current ownership structure. But somewhere or the other, the government's ownership is bound to impinge on their autonomy, be it the use in, as you said, the Jan Dhan accounts, or for that matter, funding infrastructure which has created huge asset liability management. So is the ultimate solution to these things is that the government gradually gets out of these banks? Is that possible? Or if not, then what can be done to ensure that the arm's length situation is maintained and banks are able to function independently and they don't get into this situation again, assuming that we are able to clear this round of mess through whatever means we are trying to do?
See, arm's length distance and government getting out of running banks is part of the answer. But let's also not forget, we do have private sector banks like Axis and ICICI Bank, which today are not looking particularly good, and these are private sector banks. So ultimately, one must accept that banking is a business of taking risks. And this is where the role of the regulator is very important. So yes, it is important for government to allow these banks to function, allow them to function as commercial entities, arm's length distance, and which is why you have the NIAC committee which has given excellent recommendations on how one can go about. But along with that, I think the regulator is also must be far fitter to actually regulate these banks. So there you have a regulator which has very good theoretical knowledge, but has very little practical understanding of how commercial banking is done. So I think questions must be asked not only of the government, but also about the regulator, because after all, if we have this NPA mess today, they didn't happen overnight. What was the regulator doing? And in the case of public sector banks, the RBI has a very strong presence on the board of every single public sector bank, also in the committees of each of these public sector banks. So I think the answer lies in improving the kind of governance that you have in public sector banks, allowing them to function at arm's length distance, and also beefing up the regulation, because only then will you have healthy banks, whether public or private.
So one of the reasons why we have found this whole problem of NPAs is because we have been pushing the can down the ears all this while, and suddenly it has blown up under the kind of environment we have, the kind of lead the RBI has taken. What is your sense that going ahead, do you see out of this mess these things resolved, and NCLT within the constraints that it's facing, it seems to be doing a decent job? Can we have a better banking arising out of this mess that we are in, assuming the government also provides more capital and eventually distance itself slightly as it's been trying to do? Is it possible for us to obtain something good comes out of the situation that we are in currently?
Well, hopefully it should happen, because though the IBC might have made a little bit of a mess about resolving the present stressed assets, the fact is it has sent a very strong signal to promoters that unlike in the past where the equation was clearly tilted in favor of the promoters, today the equation is clearly tilted, the playing field is clearly tilted in favor of banks. So promoters will think twice before they default. So the IBC is a very good law that has come in. It has changed the equation dramatically between lender and borrower. That, along with improved governance and, as I said, government allowing these public sector banks to function efficiently, should, I think, go a long way to making banks healthy. But let us also accept that every country periodically has gone through banking crisis. In fact, we are lucky. We haven't had the kind of crisis that even the Scandinavian countries had. So to that extent, I think one shouldn't despair. One shouldn't make a mountain out of a molehill. And when the economy revives, you will find many of these assets which are stressed today become healthy tomorrow.
One of the risks that I see arising from this thing is that now everybody seems to be chasing safe retail lending. Do you think that creates the risk of the economy, certain segments of the economy being denied banking capital like infrastructure, which has become now power sector is also joining that NPA thing? Do you think that risk is there, and how can that risk be avoided? There's always been a talk of we should have a bond market and banks should not be directly involved in lending process products, which creates asset liability mismatch. So do you see this risk of credit herd mentality where everybody is getting into the retail side and the economy facing the consequences of that?
Well, that's already happening. Most banks are now chasing retail assets because we do have a large bank which is focused on retail lending and which has done quite well for itself. But the fact is, a country like ours needs infrastructure funding. So I think it's important that the government also think about it deeply and think about, do we need to go back to the earlier model where we had term lending institutions which lend to infrastructure? And though in the past it was entirely being done by them and there were issues over there, maybe a mix of some funding through corporate bond market, some funding through term lending institutions, some public-private partnership, a combination of all these things is required. It's a complex problem which needs to be addressed much more holistically.
Clearly, as Maithili pointed out, the problem is not as bad as it is being made out. It can be resolved. It requires changes. Regulator also needs a different mindset, more learnings, and also the government needs to put in processes so that public sector banks.
In the end, I would request you all to please subscribe to our channel if not done yet, so that you can get an instant notification for the videos we upload. God bless you all.